It was an ordinary Sunday, until she realized her place at the family table was gone. But the surprise she left behind changed everything. Agnes Palmer had always tried to keep herself useful. Even as the years pressed silver into her hair and added an ache to her knees, she was the first to offer a hand. Babysitting, folding laundry, ferrying grandchildren to soccer practice, stirring soup in the church kitchen. She'd worn herself thin across decades of marriage, motherhood, and the relentless, complicated love that held family together. But the world was moving faster now, and lately Agnes felt herself slipping behind. Her eldest, Donna, was busy with her own grown children. Stephen, her youngest, barely visited, always some new work crisis, always running late. Even little Zoe, her favorite grandchild, had started rolling her eyes at Agnes's stories. It was as if the world she'd built now whirled on without her. On a damp Thursday in late spring, Agnes arrived at Donna's house with a pan of scalloped potatoes. The air inside was full of laughter, her grandkids, their friends, Donna and her husband, Paul, juggling pizza boxes and drinks. Agnes set her dish on the crowded counter. "Just in case you need extra," she said, voice light. Donna glanced over her shoulder, distracted. "Thanks, Mom, but we've got plenty." Paul grabbed takeout, and the kids aren't big on casseroles. Agnes smiled, swallowing her disappointment. She offered to help set the table. Donna shook her head, laughing. "We've got it. You should relax. Maybe just enjoy yourself for once." Dinner felt different. Agnes was used to bustling between kitchen and dining room, but now she found herself on the fringes, watching from the living room as the family carried plates and chattered around the table. Zoe sat glued to her phone. Stephen arrived late and kissed everyone except Agnes. The conversation spun past her: school drama, new jobs, summer plans. She waited for an opening, but her stories went unheard, her offers to help quietly declined. After dinner, Donna's voice grew gentle, almost apologetic. "Mom, you don't need to worry about us so much. We're good, honestly. You can just take it easy now, okay?" Paul nodded, smiling in that way he reserved for uncomfortable conversations. Agnes's heart fluttered. "Of course, dear. I know you're busy." She forced a smile, bundled her empty dish, and slipped out before anyone noticed. The drive home was slow. Rain streaked the windshield, city lights blurring in the dusk. Agnes parked in her small driveway and sat for a long moment, listening to the hum of her old car, feeling as though she'd been gently but firmly set aside. The house was silent when she entered, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum. She poured herself tea and wandered from room to room, her late husband's chair still by the window, family photos in neat rows, her sewing basket untouched for weeks. Friday morning, Agnes woke early to the sound of robins. She baked a batch of blueberry muffins for the church coffee hour and gathered a bag of outgrown toys to donate. At church, she lingered by the serving table, pouring coffee for newcomers, greeting old friends. "We missed you last week, Agnes," said Ruth, pressing her hand. "You're the glue that holds this place together." Agnes smiled, comforted by the warmth of community. In the afternoon, she called Stephen to ask if Zoe needed help with her science project. Stephen sounded distracted. "Thanks, Mom, but we're good. She's working with a classmate. Maybe next time." The call ended quickly. Agnes stood in her sunny kitchen, feeling the ache of unused energy, her hands idle. That evening, she invited Donna and the kids for Sunday dinner. "I'll make your favorite, Donna. Roast chicken, like old times." Donna hesitated. "Let me check. The kids might have plans, but I'll let you know." Agnes felt the hope flutter and fade. She spent Saturday cleaning, just in case, polishing silverware and pressing linens. By Sunday afternoon, Donna texted, "Sorry, Mom, something came up. Next week." Alone, Agnes set the table for one, spooned herself chicken and potatoes, and ate in silence. She tried to focus on gratitude, her health, her home, her memories, but the feeling of being unneeded weighed heavy. After dinner, she sorted through old letters and family records, her mind drifting to the will she'd drafted years ago. Names, dates, instructions, all neatly organized, all made when she felt essential. She closed the folder with a sigh and made a cup of tea, determined to hold on to her kindness, even as the world edged her away from its center. As dusk settled, she looked out her window at the empty street, her heart aching with the quiet question, When had she gone from being needed to being merely remembered? Monday morning brought a misty chill that clung to Agnes's front steps. She moved through her morning routine, watering the ferns, writing out a grocery list, feeding the birds in her backyard. The phone rang twice before she picked up, hoping for Donna, but it was only the pharmacy confirming a refill. Agnes tried Stephen's number just to say hello, but the call went to voicemail. She decided to busy herself with errands, walking to the post office and market. The clerk at the bakery smiled, sliding 2 rolls into her bag with a wink. "For the best church baker in town," he teased. Agnes chuckled, her spirits lifting briefly with the kindness. Still, as she made her way home, the quiet pressed in once again. Her neighbors seemed to move in pairs, families laughing, couples with dogs, a trio of teens with their arms linked. Agnes felt like a shadow passing among them. She spent part of the afternoon sorting old greeting cards, birthdays, anniversaries, letters from her grandchildren scribbled in crayon. She arranged them in a shoebox, reading each one aloud, the memories ringing louder than her empty house. Her husband's handwriting on a long-ago Valentine made her eyes sting, the words, "Forever yours," echoing in her mind. Around midday, Ruth from church stopped by, arms full of quilting supplies. "I thought we could work on that patchwork you started last spring." The 2 women spread out fabrics on Agnes's kitchen table, sharing stories and laughter as they worked. Agnes found herself smiling for the first time in days, letting the comfort of friendship ease her loneliness. Ruth talked about her own grown children, how one called every Sunday, how another had moved out west and rarely wrote. "You're not alone in this," Ruth said, voice gentle. As the afternoon waned, Agnes offered Ruth a jar of her homemade jam. "You always give more than you take, Agnes," Ruth said, hugging her goodbye. "Remember that." In the evening, Agnes baked a loaf of bread and brought it to her neighbor, Mr. Crawford, whose wife was in the hospital. He invited her in for a cup of tea, grateful for her company. They talked about the old days, block parties, lost pets, winter storms that shut down the whole street. Agnes listened to Mr. Crawford's worries, her presence a quiet comfort. After returning home, Agnes checked her email. Buried between ads and newsletters was a message from Donna. "Mom, sorry to be blunt, but you don't have to go out of your way so much. We're doing fine. Let us come to you when we need something, okay?" The words stung. Agnes stared at the screen, blinking back tears. She replied with a short, "Understood. Love you all," and closed her laptop. Later, Agnes sat in her living room with the old family folder on her lap. She read through the will again, remembering when she'd written it, how important it felt to lay out her wishes, to imagine each gift bringing a smile to her loved ones. Now, the words seemed faded, their meaning clouded by the ache of being unneeded. Night settled around her house. Agnes sipped tea, wrapped in her husband's old cardigan, and looked at the glowing windows of neighbors sharing meals, laughter, stories. She wondered if her own window looked as lonely from the outside as it felt from within. Still, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the day's small mercies, a friend's visit, a neighbor's trust, her own quiet resilience. Before bed, Agnes folded her hands in her lap and promised herself she would keep giving, even if the world no longer asked for her gifts. The next days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Tuesday, Agnes brought her famous shortbread cookies to the church's women's group, hoping for cheerful chatter and distraction. Instead, she found the group smaller than usual. A few members were traveling, others dealing with family emergencies. The conversation drifted from recipes to grandchildren to the latest fundraising drive. Agnes tried to join in but found herself hesitating. Her stories felt stale, her advice unasked for. After the meeting, she lingered in the parking lot, exchanging small talk with Mrs. Hooper, whose son lived across the country. "You know, sometimes I think we're all just waiting for the phone to ring," Mrs. Hooper confessed, her voice wistful. Agnes squeezed her hand, recognizing the shared ache. Back at home, Agnes received a call from Stephen, brief and businesslike. "Hey, Mom, just letting you know we won't make it by this weekend. Zoe's got a field trip and we're swamped. Maybe next month." Agnes tried to keep the disappointment from her voice. "Of course, dear. Give Zoe a hug for me." The call ended, leaving Agnes staring at the wall, feeling the weight of her own empty calendar. That afternoon, she decided to tackle her garden, trimming the rose bushes and pulling weeds. The sun was warm on her shoulders, the earth cool in her gloved hands. A neighborhood child, Maya, waved shyly from the sidewalk. "My grandma lives far away," she said, watching Agnes prune. "You're lucky you get to see your family." Agnes smiled gently. "Yes, I am lucky," she replied, though the words stung. She clipped a rose for Maya to take home, savoring the child's delighted grin. By evening, Agnes's house was filled with the smell of stew simmering on the stove. She set the table for one but ladled an extra bowl, just in case. As dusk settled, she watched headlights flash by her window, imagining her family pulling into the driveway, laughter filling the hall. The fantasy faded with the first sip of her tea. The next morning brought errands, a stop at the pharmacy, a quick visit to the local library. The librarian, Mrs. Caldwell, greeted Agnes with warmth. "We've got a new book club starting. You'd be perfect for it." Agnes signed up, grateful for the invitation. She checked out a stack of mysteries and headed to the grocery store, where she ran into Ruth. They shared a few minutes of gossip about the minister's new car and swapped casserole recipes. That evening, Agnes received a group text from Donna, photos of the family at the amusement park, Zoe clutching a giant stuffed bear, Stephen and Paul grinning with ice cream cones. Agnes stared at the images, heart clenching with longing. She tapped out a congratulatory reply and set the phone aside, blinking away tears. Before bed, she wrote in her journal, a habit she'd kept since childhood. "It hurts, sometimes, to love this much and be left out. But I'll keep making room at the table, just in case." She tucked the journal beneath her pillow, the house settling around her, quiet but still hers. Thursday dawned rainy and cold. Agnes spent the morning fussing over her house, polishing picture frames, watering her ferns, dusting shelves lined with family photos. She lingered over each frame, her wedding day, Donna's first recital, Stephen's high school graduation, Zoe's toothy grin as a toddler. Every photograph felt like proof she belonged somewhere, even if the present told her otherwise. Mid-morning, Ruth called, inviting Agnes for lunch at the cafe near the church. The conversation was easy at first, weather, gardening, a new movie on TV. But soon Ruth noticed Agnes's faraway look. "You seem low, Agnes. Is it the kids?" Agnes hesitated, then nodded. "They don't need me anymore, Ruth. I know life changes, but I never thought I'd feel so left behind." Ruth listened without judgment, her eyes kind. "Families go through seasons, Agnes. But don't let them make you feel small. You matter, even when you're not the center." Ruth's words lingered as Agnes headed home, both comforted and challenged. Later, Agnes received an invitation to the church's spring fundraiser. She was asked to coordinate desserts, a role she'd held for years. She dove into planning, poring over recipes, drafting lists, and calling volunteers. The work was familiar, the sense of purpose soothing. That evening, she prepared dough for her famous cinnamon rolls, humming along to the radio. The next day, as Agnes delivered a basket of rolls to the church, she overheard two women talking. "Agnes always volunteers, but doesn't she have family nearby?" "Maybe they're just busy," the other replied. "But she's always around here. She must be lonely." Agnes's cheeks burned. She slipped away, the joy of giving soured by the sting of pity. Back home, a package waited at her door, a belated birthday gift from her cousin in Maine. Inside was a scarf, hand-knit in Agnes's favorite colors, and a note, "You always put everyone else first. Hope you'll keep something cozy for yourself for once." Agnes wrapped the scarf around her shoulders, grateful for the reminder that some bonds still held. That night, she received a terse email from Donna. "Mom, the kids are busy this weekend, and we're trying to keep things low-key at home. Maybe give us some space for a while? Love you." Agnes stared at the screen, the finality of the words sharp and cold. She replied simply, "Understood. I love you always." She spent the rest of the evening restlessly tidying, trying to outrun the ache. She opened her family folder again, rereading the will and her notes. This time, the words seemed to pulse with new meaning, reminders that her choices, her memories, her generosity, still mattered, even if they weren't wanted right now. As rain tapped at the windows, Agnes realized she'd reached her breaking point. She'd spent a lifetime giving, hoping for a place at the table, only to be gently but persistently set aside. She folded her hands in her lap, tears stinging her eyes, and whispered, "Maybe it's time I remember my own worth." With that thought, something in her shifted, a tiny seed of resolve, just beginning to take root. Friday morning arrived with sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. Agnes poured herself coffee and sat at the table, staring at the folder that contained her will and family records. The ache of Donna's latest message lingered, but now it mingled with a quiet determination she hadn't felt in years. She decided to review her will, line by line, memory by memory. She thought carefully about what each bequest meant. Some items, she realized, had been included out of habit, promises made in times when family gathered for every holiday, every birthday. But things had changed. Agnes wanted her story, her care, to be felt by those who valued it, not just those who expected it. She called her attorney, Mrs. Gordon, asking for an appointment. "Of course, Mrs. Palmer," came the warm reply. "Monday at 10, just bring whatever you'd like to discuss." Agnes hung up, feeling lighter already. To clear her head, she visited the library's new book club. The room was full of laughter and debate, some arguing for mysteries, others for romance or biographies. Agnes was welcomed eagerly and found herself swept into the energy, exchanging opinions and recommendations. For the first time in weeks, she was part of something where her presence felt wanted, not merely tolerated. Afterward, she met Ruth at the farmer's market. The two friends browsed fresh strawberries, picked out wildflowers, and sipped coffee in the sun. Agnes shared her decision to update her will, her voice firm. "I want my legacy to go where it matters, where it's remembered. Maybe it's time I stop waiting for someone else to make room for me." Ruth hugged her. "You've always made a place for others, Agnes. You deserve to choose your own seat now." Saturday was a blur of energy. Agnes sorted her closets and drawers, setting aside heirlooms, jewelry, and letters she'd written for each grandchild. She relabeled some envelopes, adding notes about the meaning behind each gift, the stories, recipes, and traditions she hoped would live on. For the first time, she considered including a few trusted friends, like Ruth, in her bequests, people who had shown up, listened, and stood beside her when she needed it most. Sunday, she baked a lemon cake for Mr. Crawford, who greeted her with a grateful smile. They talked about lost spouses and changing times, their conversation filled with the quiet comfort of mutual understanding. Agnes realized how much these small exchanges mattered, how friendship could fill spaces that family sometimes left empty. That night, Agnes sat at her kitchen table, drafting a letter to Donna, Stephen, and Zoe. "I have loved you every day of my life. My door, and my heart, remain open. But I will not let myself disappear. My gifts are my way of saying, I was here, I loved, I mattered. I hope you will remember me with kindness, not out of obligation." She placed the letter in her will folder, alongside a fresh list of bequests, and felt a peace settle over her for the first time in months. As Agnes turned off the lights and prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, her chin lifted, eyes bright. For once, she saw not just a grandmother or a mother, but a woman with a voice, a choice, and a will all her own. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright. Agnes dressed with care, blue dress, pearl earrings, hair brushed smooth. She gathered her documents, the letter for her family, and a tote of keepsakes, then headed to Mrs. Gordon's law office. The drive was quiet, but inside, Agnes felt a current of energy building. Mrs. Gordon welcomed her with a steady handshake and a reassuring smile. "It's always good to see you, Agnes. Let's make sure your wishes are honored, exactly as you want them." They reviewed the current will, page by page. Agnes explained the changes she wanted, adjusted bequests, new letters, a special legacy for Ruth and Mr. Crawford, and personal gifts for her grandchildren to be delivered at meaningful milestones, not just as formalities. Mrs. Gordon nodded, making careful notes. "I want them to know I was here, that I tried. That my love isn't a reward for attention, but a story I want them to remember," Agnes said, her voice clear and unafraid. Mrs. Gordon promised to prepare the drafts and arrange for official signatures soon. As Agnes left the office, she felt taller, more herself than she had in months. On the way home, Agnes stopped at the park. She watched children chasing each other through puddles and a pair of teenagers playing chess under a maple tree. The world was full of connections, some fleeting, some lasting. She smiled at a toddler who handed her a wildflower, the child's grandmother beaming from a nearby bench. That afternoon, Agnes attended a book club meeting, her new mystery novel in hand. The conversation was lively, and her insights about the characters sparked laughter and thoughtful debate. Afterward, several members invited her for coffee next week, eager to keep the conversation going. Agnes agreed, her heart light. Back home, she took down the box of family Christmas ornaments and carefully wrapped those with special stories. One for Zoe, one for Stephen, one for Donna. Each got a note, the tale behind it written in Agnes's looping hand. She found a photo of herself as a young woman and placed it with her own letter, a message for the future. I was more than what you saw at the edge of the room. I was the center once, and I lived, and I loved. That evening, Agnes called Ruth and invited her for tea. The friends sat at Agnes's kitchen table, sunlight pooling on the checked tablecloth, sharing shortbread and laughter. Ruth admired Agnes's resolve. You've done something powerful, Agnes. You didn't wait for someone to make space. You claimed your own place. As darkness fell, Agnes sat alone in her living room, the will folder open on her lap, her notes organized and her heart steady. The ache of being set aside lingered, but it was softer now, dwarfed by the satisfaction of knowing she'd chosen her own ending to her own story. Before bed, Agnes lit a candle and said a quiet prayer, for her family, for her friends, and for herself. She slept deeply, no longer just the person others needed, but the author of her own legacy. The week began to shift in small, noticeable ways. At church on Wednesday, word had quietly spread that Agnes was updating her will. She caught Ruth exchanging knowing glances with Mrs. Hooper, but no one pried. Instead, Agnes found herself approached by a few younger parishioners, who asked for advice on the bake sale or sought her secret for fluffy cinnamon rolls. She welcomed their questions, feeling purpose well within her. That afternoon, Agnes received a handwritten card from Mr. Crawford. Thank you for the lemon cake and the company. Your kindness made these hard days easier. She pinned the card on her fridge, letting gratitude replace the emptiness she'd felt. Midweek, Stephen finally called, not just a rushed check-in, but a real conversation. Hey, Mom, Zoe's been asking about you. We should stop by soon. Agnes smiled, masking the ache of so many missed weeks. I'd like that very much, Stephen. Let me know what works for you. The call ended on a hopeful note, though Agnes knew better than to pin her happiness on future plans. That night, she received a text from Donna. Hope you're well, Mom. Sorry we've been out of touch. Things are hectic. Maybe dinner next month. Agnes replied warmly, no trace of hurt in her words. I'm doing well. I'd love to see you when it works out. I hope you're taking care of yourself, Donna. Friday, Agnes spent the morning at the market with Ruth, then stopped by the library to help set up for the next book club. The librarian, Mrs. Caldwell, thanked her for her energy and ideas. You've really brought something special to our group, Agnes. The words felt like a balm, confirming her decision to claim her own place in the world. On Saturday, she finalized her new will with Mrs. Gordon. The signing was quick, efficient, but carried the weight of a lifetime. Agnes watched as each page was stamped and signed, a record of her voice, her story, and her choices. Mrs. Gordon congratulated her on making decisions so clearly guided by love and self-respect. That night, Ruth came for tea and brought a scrapbook she'd made of church events. Agnes featured in every season, laughing, serving, celebrating. The two friends paged through memories, marveling at how much they'd lived, how far they'd come. I hope, when they look back, they see me as I truly am, Agnes said quietly. They will, Agnes. And if they don't, your words and gifts will tell them, Ruth replied, squeezing her hand. Before bed, Agnes sat on her porch, listening to the chorus of crickets and distant laughter from passing neighbors. The ache of being unneeded had softened. Now she saw the ripples of her kindness reaching beyond the boundaries of family, carried forward in the lives of all she touched. She wrote one more note to tuck inside her will. If you are reading this, know that my heart was always open to you, and you were always needed, even when you didn't see it. Sunday brought a gentle warmth, a soft breeze stirring the curtains as Agnes prepared her small house for company. She wasn't sure if anyone would visit, family, friend, or neighbor, but she set the table for 4 anyway, just in case. She arranged fresh flowers in a vase, baked a batch of scones, and let sunlight fill the rooms. By midday, Ruth stopped in, her arms full of tulips and her laughter spilling into the house. They shared coffee and stories at the kitchen table, the comfort of friendship steady and deep. Agnes showed Ruth the updated will, her hand steady as she described the bequests. the letters, the photographs tucked away for Zoe and Stephen and Donna, and for the friends who had filled the spaces family left empty. "I've made my wishes clear," Agnes said, voice strong. "I don't want what's left of me to be lost in silence." Ruth hugged her tight. "You've built a legacy of love, Agnes. No one can do more than that." In the afternoon, a knock at the door startled Agnes. Stephen stood on the porch, Zoe by his side, a tentative smile on his face. "We were out for a drive and thought we'd stop by." Agnes welcomed them with scones and tea. Conversation was awkward at first, but Zoe brightened as Agnes told her about the book club and the wildflowers blooming in the park. Stephen helped fix a loose chair leg, and for a few precious moments, Agnes felt the old rhythm return, the easy give and take of family, no one excluded. After they left, Agnes sat at her table, letting the echoes of laughter and conversation linger. She realized that, whether her family needed her in obvious ways or not, her care and presence mattered all the same. Her story was not only written in legal papers but lived in the memories, the recipes, the quiet kindnesses she scattered through her days. That evening, Agnes wrote a final letter, not to be included in the will but to be kept in her journal. "I have known what it is to be needed, and I have learned to need myself. My table will always have a place for those I love, but I will never leave myself standing in the hallway again." As dusk fell, Agnes poured herself one last cup of tea, savoring the simple joy of belonging to herself. Outside, the world moved on, quick and restless, never stopping, but inside, Agnes's heart beat with quiet certainty. She was not forgotten. She was not unneeded. She was, and always had been, the author of her own story.